Welcome to Blockchain Recorded, the podcast for the tech curious, where we talk about anything and everything related to the exponentially evolving crypto, blockchain, and Web 3.0 space. Our mission is simple: to share knowledge, facilitate discourse, and help evolve education in blockchain fundamentals, decentralization solutions, and relevant use cases for today's digital economy. I'm your host, Nina Tserar. Today's episode is part 2 of our 2-part highlights Showreel series in honoring the end of our second podcast season. Our team prepared a showreel of conversations that resonate with us and remind us why we do what we do. Today you will hear highlights from the following guests in Season 2. Ramsey from Kabocha, Tali Rejun from Block Labs, Nadav Zemmer from hs.credits, Nevin Freeman from Reserve, Denison Bertram from Tali, Laurent Perello from Tron DAO, and Matthew Baudet from Linera. Again, we are grateful to everyone in our community of guests, sponsors, and listeners. Without your support, we would not be who we are today. Enjoy part 2. Before we begin, this podcast is possible by our sponsor at Ambire. The Ambire wallet is one of the top products in crypto asset management. It is the first open source, non-custodial smart wallet that delivers exceptional user experience combined with solid security. With Ambire Wallet, users can easily navigate the world of Web3. It comes packed with features like built-in swaps, cross-chain bridges, integrated earning opportunities, and more. In addition, Ambire offers things like human-readable transaction parsing, eliminating ERC20 approvals and front-running protection. The smart wallet uses gas abstractions that allow for unique features like paying for gas with stablecoins. Users can batch multiple transactions to save time and gas fees. The wallet also supports NFTs and allows you to connect to any dApp via Wallet Connect. You can use it with an email and password or add hardware wallets or hot wallets as signers to upgrade your security. And the best part? Ambire speaks human. The UI is friendly and informative, ensuring you understand what you're doing and eliminating risks for mistakes. Ambire Wallet users are currently eligible for continuous wallet token rewards. To learn more and get your Ambire account today, visit www.ambire.com. That is AMBIRE.com. So today we have with us Ramsey, who is the technical steward for the Kabocha project. He's a technical startup founder, systems architect, and blockchain engineer. Ramsey, welcome to Blockchain Recorded.
Thanks for having me, Nina.
So Kabocha. Are you ready to answer the question where Kabocha comes in?
Yeah, so I mean, like, Kabocha is the first embodiment of Edgeware's multi-chain philosophy. Multi-chain, Edgeware was more leaning towards Ethereum sort of philosophy of being this kind of single chain, build dApps on top of approach. And now myself being one of the people that want to kind of send it into a different trajectory, which is to go into the design philosophy of the multi-chain. And so it's a new this is a new concepts. It's like challenging to kind of deal with, it's like, we're used to being a community with, crypto communities are used to just being like one community, one token and one chain and one like dApp. But now, I guess with multi-chain, you can be one community or one ecosystem that has multiple chains in it, and they each, and it's like this the underlying infrastructure has relay chains, it has parachains, it has bridges between multiple relay chains, and it's this like different underlying fabric there. And so, like, Kabocha is a project that's funded by the Edgeware Treasury, and it's initial purpose is to be a parachain in the Kusama network. And the name Kabocha came around to resonate more with the feeling of Kusama. Kusama is an artist, in polka dot artist. She actually pioneered polka dots.
Yeah, so she uses polka dots everywhere.
She uses polka dots everywhere. She made basically polka dots a thing. And she was in like the gallery. She's like in the Tate Gallery in here in London. Like, she's everywhere. She's she's her favorite thing. She's like obsessed with pumpkins, like these like types of pumpkins that she's designed. So we just called it we just called it what she called it there, but like Kabocha, cool. just to continue to the connection. Yeah, to continue that sort of like pithy narrative. And Edgeware, we're kind of like, we got a chip on our shoulder, like the Edgeware community, like we're kind of outsiders. Edgeware's always been like a group of outsiders from Parity, the community of Edgeware showing up in Kusama. Okay, we're Kabocha. And so it's like, and it's a birth, like we're a chain giving birth to a new chain, and that's kind of a new thing. Like typically, you have these centralized like foundations or startups setting up a chain and starting from there. But we're actually already a chain, giving birth, getting funded, and like giving birth to a new chain.
And you're a separate chain of Edgeware. Yeah,
we're a separate chain, and how we're linked is that we're taking a snapshot of all the Edgeware balances and persisting them into Kabocha. So like everyone that has like, so basically the distribution is going to be pretty much the same, give or take, new crowd loan participants and new contributors to Kabocha. And so, so we are completely separate chains, but similar community, or same community, same ecosystem, a sort of subset of the community, teams within the community working on a project within our ecosystem. We're trying to, like, one kind of perspective is like, if we were to do these large tech corporations in a decentralized way, what would it be like? Look at Google. They have all sorts of projects going on. They have, they're working on, they started with search. Now they're into manipulating people for to get advertising revenue. And also you got AI and you got like autonomous cars and things like that.
Yeah, I think they're probably doing stuff beyond what we know. But yeah, I get your point.
Sure. Yeah. But the point was, is like there's all sorts of teams doing all sorts of things.
Right.
It's like it's a huge organism at Google. And it's like 100 or 100,000 or so employees, people working there. Obviously, it's got quite a steep hierarchical,
very much
structure of executive power sort of thing. And so we're thinking of like designing a different sort of system in it. Like we're trying to see what it's like to create technology that doesn't have that has more of a flat kind of structure.
In terms of hierarchy, you mean?
In terms of like hierarchy, we've got it is quite flat. You can turn up to Edgeware community and like build a little reputation. So people, so you just, hang around there a bit, show value, give your perspectives, and you very quickly, you can build a reputation there, be of use of in some way, sweep a few floors. Like a nice analogy for Edgeware, at least my experience coming through Edgeware, is it's kind of like an ashram for founders or an ashram for creators and developers to come in, meditate a bit on blockchain, sweep a few floors, and then once you get enlightened to do your own project, you can then get funded by the treasury, Edgeware's treasury to do a project that the community thinks is cool or valuable or important in some way. And
just to give a concrete example, so this is not just for developers. You can do, what kinds of projects within this ecosystem? You're talking about, you don't have to be a developer to join.
You don't have to be a developer to join, no.
Because I think it can be somewhat intimidating, for sort of the layperson. They think, you have to be a developer to know, code and.
Absolutely, no, that's understandable.
Because the aim is not just that.
The aim is not just that. It's like the way I see these decentralized organizations, and I'm intentionally not calling them DAOs because DAOs are layer 2 dApps on a blockchain, so they don't have total sovereignty over. They can't be they don't have self-determination over all the decision making about their underlying infrastructure. Like the fees, they don't have control over the fees. They don't have control over whether there's a fork and whether there's a consensus amongst the wider ecosystem to choose to do that fork, and what's going to happen to the assets in their dApp, that are connected to other physical assets. How does that work? There's going to be they don't have sovereignty over everything. So the decentralized organizations like Edgeware, it's almost more potent than a DAO because it has control over its underlying infrastructure. It can make design choices. It can make changes over anything it wants, including the fees, and it's not affected by as many external factors. So that's, I just wanted to preface what I was saying with that, because I think that's quite important, knowing the distinction between a DAO and a a DAO on a chain, a decentralized organization. And a decentralized organization is essentially a new way of making a company, or a new way of making an organization of human beings, be it a state, a company, or anything, any sort of label that you want to put on humans organizing.
My guest today is Tali Rejun, whom I've hosted before on our show. Last time we talked about his fourth tech project and initiative. This time will be slightly different, as I will talk with Tali about the development of Block Labs, his dedication to Web3 R&D, and a further dive into on-chain communication privacy. After finishing his doctorate, Tali established Block Labs and Fourth Tech, and less than a year ago co-founded the show. Tali is also a guest lecturer in the Contruli MBA program, a blockchain Adria resident speaker, and a UN CE Fact expert. Tali, welcome back to our blockchain recorded podcast. I promise to our listeners to be as objective as possible since we are co-founders of the show.
Thanks, Nina. Good to be back.
Given you have years of tech development behind you, who exactly is we when you refer to we? How did you go about setting up your development team?
Yes, we in this case is me and my dream team.
And your dev team? Is this mostly your dev team, dream team?
So I was lucky in this regard. Basically, I met Denis in November 2017, I think, and Andrei joined us in the early 2018. We launched our first wallet-to-wallet data file exchange protocol in April 2018 on Ethereum mainnet. There were quite some experimental Web3 developments done from 2018 to 2020. We developed on-chain data notarization and C-chain UN EC pilot that connects the X509 identity standard with an on-chain wallet. So Peter joined, the third member in the dev team. Basically, Peter joined in early 2020s and made a great addition to the team. So with our Ethereum DMail, we managed to accumulate quite a user base until Ethereum transaction prices went up to unsustainable levels. There were no layer 2s at the time, so we were searching for an alternative and start to develop the same solutions on Rust-based Edgeware substrate. We were always tackling with the messaging, on-chain messaging possibility until Solana. There were just no alternatives. So for the on-chain messaging that we had in mind that would be fully on-chain, the blockchains at the time were just too slow. So we were basically already Rust-versed from our Edgeware build. So then Solana came and it was really a no-brainer. And with the completed team, the development started also on the DChat front, let's say. So that is how we started, and that is how we gathered and formed as a team.
Just to clarify, you mentioned DMail, DChat, because since we previously also spoke in an episode, are these new names? Because you mentioned before 4DX, 4IM.
Yes.
You rebrand or I would say rename?
Yeah, it's quite simple if could be explained. Basically, for the last 4 years, we were developing framework and protocols for the Web3 communication. So, for example, the 4DX, for data exchange, is a protocol and a smart contract name that is deployed. And it creates the foundation for products such as, let's say, DMail. Okay.
Oh, I see.
And then we have the 4IM, which is the instant messaging. The same, it's a protocol that is developed behind the product such as DChat.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So protocol name versus product name.
Yes.
So nothing was replaced. It's still, you just added the product names.
Yeah, we are now at the stage that we started to developing products out of the technology.
Can you briefly just guide us through the Fourth Tech releases again?
Yeah, just to clarify, basically Fourth Tech is an end user public blockchain platform developed by Block Labs. The evolution reaches back to 2018 when the first beta or 1.0 was deployed on Ethereum mainnet, proving our concept of secure, private, encrypted wallet-to-wallet data file exchange. protocol. The C chain, which is enterprise hashnet-based DLT protocol, was the C chain integration and network support followed in 2020s, which is now open to the public as a part of the staging environment, so anybody can go and test it. Then the 2.0 update followed in early 2021 that brought data notarization, upgraded on-chain identity, for wallet support for all Chromium and Firefox browsers, and added Substrate and Solana blockchain support. So if we go a little bit, if we touch on the future, the coming 3.0 update, which is planned for the end of this year or the early, let's say, 2023, will be the biggest, where finally all the pieces will come together in a unified modern design powered by state-of-the-art code and architecture.
Very interesting. We all use free email and messaging services. In fact, we depend on them to be our main daily communication tools. But clearly there's something broken here. Privacy is being violated. Our data is exploited. Actually, just today, I had a few phone calls, random phone calls from different parts of the world, knowing that that's not a number that I know. So our data is exploited. What is the problem of the currently centralized communication and social systems?
Yeah, so the internet changed the way we live. It opened the highway to unlimited communication and revolutionized access to information. But I think it failed greatly in regards to our digital freedom and privacy. So instead of providing a safe environment for online communication, the internet evolved into a system of centralized intermediaries which enable mass surveillance, data mining, to enforce intrusive ad campaigns or sell our data as they see fit. So furthermore, I think that current Web2 services establish models that prevents us from owning our data or our identities. So the current model is just not okay.
No, definitely not. Most people might not even understand what is behind online communication platforms and social media today. Some actually may not even care, many who I've spoken to, which I actually find disturbing. What are your thoughts here?
It's quite simple in the end, but most people, like you said, don't understand it or basically don't care about it. Online free communication platforms, which we use every day, from social media to email services, chats, whatever, are not quite that free, okay? The data in the form of data files or media files that we create is being used to generate significant insights for big technology companies and are being sold to the third parties as they generate more profit than the underlying service cost. Okay, so this is one thing that we must understand. On the outside, the services are free or low cost, but we are paying greatly with the loss of privacy. So companies make revenues by advertising product to us, many products. We are just tourists visiting their closed ecosystems, creating valuable content for free, and spending valuable time and money in the end. So we are tourists that can be banned or locked out of the services at any time for just or unjust reasons, without any chance of an appeal. So we do not own our own identities, we do not own our published data, nor we don't hold any control over the services access. We cannot move our social accounts to the other platforms, nor we cannot not move our social network that we establish and create during the years. So that's just the case in the current Web2 world.
How does a project like yours differ from the centralized platforms that you mentioned?
Yeah, there are a lot of major differences. For example, we build an open code on decentralized public systems, 100% aligned with decentralized ideology. We defend transparency, immutability, and permissionless. Clearly, there are also big technological differences between us and centralized communication services. For example, we enable wallet-to-wallet on-chain communication that is end-to-end encrypted. And at its core prevents data mining, data theft, email spoofing, identity theft. In the case of Fortec, the Dmail and Dchat onboarding requires no phone number or no email address. Your wallet represents your ID. Your wallet address serves as your email or chat contact. We don't want users' data, and we don't need it. So, yeah.
Furthermore, how does a centralized platform work?
The case is completely opposite when we are dealing with centralized systems. The centralized messenger service, for example, stores all of our data on their centralized servers, which are always vulnerable to spoof, that is single point of failure attacks. In the Fortec case, messages are temporarily stored on the Solana blockchain, never on any company servers. So there's the matter of encryption. Fortec messages are end-to-end encrypted, where only user can decrypt them using his or her private key. In the case of centralized messaging services, in most cases, master private keys are usually held by the service if we are talking about encryption solutions.
So anyone can already, you mentioned in terms of Dmails, can anyone start sending them? Meaning, what does a user need to know and do, even for someone who's new to the crypto wallet concept?
Anyone could start to send or exchange emails right now using our Fortec services, which are meant for the end users. Only the wallet is needed. In our case, we had to develop a unique non-custodial multi-chain wallet that supports wallet-to-wallet data exchange. So users set up their wallets in any Chromium or Mozilla browser, log in to the user interface, and they're good to go. Naturally, some gas is needed to power the blockchain transactions. This depends on the chosen chain because there are multi-chain available. So there's also a white label available for DAOs or other Web3 projects.
So for newbies who are more familiar with the crypto protocols, where do you find this wallet to set up in the mentioned browsers?
In our case, its wallet links are available on fortec.io.
Your webpage.
Yeah, of course, it's the same. Plus, we wrote all these manuals and recorded videos.
So today we have with us Nadav Zemer. Nadav, or Principal Z, as most refer to him as, is a software engineer from his early days, an educator, a public high school principal, actually freshly former high school principal, writer, Web3 researcher, thought leader, founder, and the list goes on. He's the author of the book called Education in the Digital Age, How We Get There, where he offers an evaluation of how digital technology and economics are poised to transform education by examining the concept of academic capital. He dives into the reengineering of high school credits and using blockchain technology for the credits ledger system, all topics that we will try to cover today. So Principal Z does not just work at the intersection of technology and education, but is truly aiming to revolutionize the way education is carried out, also with the help of his project hs.credits. He is first tackling later years in public high school, primarily in the US, but hopefully with time beyond borders as well. So with that, Nadav, welcome to the show. I've really been looking forward to this podcast.
Nina, so have I. I've got to say, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and the way just you've engaged so far and how much you know about the project, this is an incredible podcast, and I've gone back and listened to your stream. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We're based in Central Eastern Europe, and our non-American audience, we do actually have a lot of US people, but our non-American audience may not fully understand the concept of high school credits. And given that you said that you've also, you were in France, you're probably familiar with that. So what are credits, just briefly? Why do you need them? Why do we care about them? How does this differ from maybe the private high school system, if at all? So sort of a compound question, but...
Yeah. So to issue a diploma in the state of New York with the New York State seal on it, to call it a New York State high school diploma, students need to show that they've graduated high school, and they define that in terms of these credits. 22 annualized credits. And in New York, it's actually, I know the traditional Carnegie was 120 hours. In New York, it's actually 108 hours of studying a topic where your teacher certifies that you met their requirements, and sometimes there's an exam associated with certain content areas as well. In New York in particular, we have something called the Regents exam. So yeah, a unit is just it's a measure of learning. So if we were talking just now about the ledger of accounts, this is what's collected in the ledger is credits of, and that if you collect enough of them, you get to graduate.
Okay. And just for my personal understanding, do you have in mind the application of your concept outside of the US? Because right now you're focusing locally, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And you had mentioned before that we'll get to talk about the DAO, which we never get to talk about. So it's that connects to this question, because what I would say is anyone that wants to take this and apply it somewhere outside the US, come, we'll give you everything, and we'll help you set up as a DAO and go for it. I don't know your systems well enough. I couldn't. I'm not the person that can do that.
Of course.
And my team, we're not the right, but we have what we have, and part of it will be useful to you, and part of it you'll invent things that will come back and benefit us, right? So we've had a relationship in the past with somebody in Finland. And so we had these conversations. We're going to focus. I'm really focused on New York City. I don't even know more than that. I think, I have friends in rural districts. I grew up in Chicago. I know other school districts, but my focus is, I think, just in terms of high leverage, if I can get New York to flip, that's going to be a strong start.
I'm wondering, how did you come up with the idea behind an open source blockchain ledger of, you talk about gold standard high school credits? What does the gold standard consist of when you speak about this?
Yep. So the word gold, and I remember this idea originally came from me thinking of Bitcoin as a ledger, right? And that's thought of as digital gold. So it's similar, right? There's a soft fiat money that you can print at will for the benefit of politicians. There are these soft fiat credits that politicians are printing. They're actually the incentives right now. And so it's all about incentives, and the incentives of gold versus the incentives of fiat, and hard credits versus soft credits. So the incentives of soft credits is that each politician should be able to turn some knobs so that graduation rates tick up every year, so that the headlines don't say graduation rates tick down this year, right? On the election year, especially. So they need to have that control to do that. And so they just keep issuing more credits just to have that inching up. And so the incentives really drive us to get to meaningless credits, which is what we have now. A high school diploma from a school you never heard of in an inner city, you could get that and not know how to read in some cases. In some schools you get that and it means you're very well educated, right? It's a really school by school basis. And that's the whole point of a transcript and a credit, is to have something that's not localized to each school. So the gold standard is a few things are involved in that. One, right now teachers evaluate their own students for the credits, and the students give them puppy eyes and and sad stories and whatever else, and get grades that they probably shouldn't get, right? And because kids are amazing social engineers,
of course,
and adults are not yet, right? And I mean, maybe they should get credit for that. Maybe that's the credit that's even more important. So maybe they should get the credit in the end. I don't know, but sure. The hard credits are evaluated by pseudonymous credit experts on our platform. 3 of them evaluate every credit. So that's the first part of hard. It's evaluated externally according to a common rubric, and there's no preference and connection like that. The other piece of it is that it's not based on standardized thinking and standardization. Right? It's based on that. It's not based on the push model where the people behind, it's shocking that until this day, I can still say a bunch of white guys in a room. It was one woman they let in this time with the Common Core standards, but until now, there's only been one woman let into the room of designing these standards. It's all white guys, and they create it's pretty amazing, and they create these how everybody should think, just like me, and then they get these textbooks that tell you what's important and what's not important, and don't even tell you about the stuff that's not important because it's not in the book, right? And it kind of flows down, and then kids don't know how to what's the internet, right? And schools are scared of the internet because there's all this misinformation on there, instead of teaching kids the skills to find the right information on there, because it's this amazing textbook that's better than any textbook they have. So the gold credit is not based on standardization. It's based on project-based learning. And this is not cutting-edge stuff. This is the stuff that Rudolf Steiner was teaching 150 years ago. This is what we did before industrial schooling. So we're going back to the ancient ways of teaching. And with microphones, even more, the oral traditions, right? So it's getting back to how the brain works, having experiences that you never forget in high school, having the high school experience and the school experience in general be a magical time where you're discovering your potential and exploring ideas, and getting onto the real world and interacting with people, especially in the 11th and 12th grade. So the gold standard is really just performance-based assessment That's high stakes. High stakes, performance-based assessment. That's really all I'm talking about.
So today with us, we have Nevin Freeman. He's the co-founder and CEO of Reserve, where he oversees strategy, legal, and team coordination. Nevin is an entrepreneur who has co-founded 3 companies. His purpose is to solve the coordination problems that are stopping humanity from achieving its potential. And he's particularly concerned about averting the long-term risks posed by the development of artificial intelligence. So on that note, Nevin, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Nina.
I have been following you for some time now, actually, and the work you do I think is remarkable. You give crypto a meaningful, humanitarian, and much needed use case. That's actually really admirable.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're trying to do is kind of just like the original idea of cryptocurrency, right? Is sort of creating a form of money that is not dependent on governments, and that's free and open and accessible to anybody. So in a sense, the idea behind it isn't very inventive at all, but we've had to come up with a bunch of ideas for how to try to make that work in practice.
Yeah. Well, you advocate for access to stable currencies to be considered a human right. All right, let's switch a little bit. And actually, there are 2 quotes from your website that caught my attention, and I know that you speak about this immensely. So the first one is stable currency, a human right, right? And then the second one is a stable, decentralized, and inflation-resistant world reserve currency not pegged to any one fiat currency. Now, I know the latter is your long-term mission at Reserve, and you've discussed both topics at length already. But can you just briefly speak to this?
Yeah. We realized maybe a year or so ago, we're trying to distill this attitude that we have about it being very important for people to have access to stable currency. And we realized that humanity kind of does have a framework for talking about which things are like truly essential to, in the words of, I think, the UN, like living a dignified human life. And that's the idea of a human right. And rights are kind of weird things. It's like, how do you decide if something should be a right or not? But one way of thinking about it is like, if we sort of agree that it's essential to a functioning, flourishing life, and if it's something that really is within reach of offering to everybody, at a relatively low cost, then we tend to consider it a right. It's like, clean, access to clean, drinking water or something, for example. It's like everybody needs it. And it's like, yeah, it seems like we can do that. It seems like something that's not particularly difficult, as opposed to, for example, I don't know, like let's say I'm just making this up, so maybe this is going to be a weird example, but you can imagine saying like, well, mental health is a human right and everyone should be mentally healthy, because if you're not mentally healthy, then, your experience is going to be bad and full of suffering and problems, and you'll make bad decisions and so on. But we don't know how to offer mental health to everybody. That's a very complicated thing. And so it wouldn't make sense for us to decide it's a human right because, we just don't know how to offer it. And stable currency is kind of interesting because you could argue that it's like mental health, where it's like, well, it's a very, economics are very complicated, currency and markets and so on are very complicated. And so maybe there is actually no way to guarantee access to a stable unit of currency to everybody. But our attitude is kind of like, yeah, sort of, but like technologically speaking, it actually doesn't seem out of reach. It actually seems like the forces that make it so that some populations don't have access to stable currency are often political or legal. And if we just sort of were willing to use the technology and knowledge at our disposal, we actually could provide access to stable currency to many more people, or to everybody. And so like these days, we're doing that by basically opening up the access to the US dollar to people who maybe would have had a harder time getting that access because the US dollar is relatively stable. And then in the long term, we're sort of looking for a way to not even depend on something like the US dollar, so that we could actually, from a technological perspective, offer that stability to the entire world indefinitely. But again, it's like it really ends up being like a legal or political challenge to do that, I think.
You have strong knowledge regarding stablecoins, given everything that I've listened to. I mean, we all know USDT and USDC and the recent Terra and downfall. But in fact, you actually warned about the algo stablecoins a few years ago. I'm sure everybody asked you this at the Latin American Bitcoin and Blockchain Conference. I also saw the video you posted on your blog trying to explain it. I think it would be beneficial for our listeners to get a wider perspective. But I wanted to ask you, what, if anything, has changed or reaffirmed in your perspective post the Terra collapse?
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not sick of talking about it, but
No, I'm not. It's a good question. What has changed? I mean, the thing is, like, we'd already seen the senior shares model be tried and fall apart a few times. And so in a sense, I would say very little has changed in my perspective. It sort of was obvious to us upon just thinking it through without even seeing any examples. And then the examples have kind of confirmed what was suspected. I do feel like, though, this is like a slightly more powerful confirmation because, there's the people who were believers in that idea would say, well, yes, this thing has the potential to fall apart, but so long as demand is maintained, the party will keep going. It's sort of like as long as the music is playing, right. It's fine. And there was a way in which Terra and DAO in particular, exerted a really powerful reality distortion field, which, ultimately ended up being the cause of all of this destruction. But, before the collapse, you couldn't really be 100% confident that they wouldn't somehow manage to pull it off, to just keep the music going forever. Mm-hmm. So I think that having something, having a senior share style stablecoin fall apart at that scale, even with, an enormously powerful marketing force and quite a big war chest and an enormous community of believers and so on, having that fall apart, I think just makes it that much more obvious how quickly the sentiment can shift on these things, right? And that's something where, you can theorize about market participants and how they will act in different situations. But I think that this really concretely illustrated that people who were believers can go to being non-believers in literally a matter of minutes, just by seeing something happen on the charts and in the liquidity pools and so on that they didn't expect, where they were so confident, and then as soon as everyone starts to see that the thing is unraveling, that sentiment can just be so self-referential. And so we had theorized that that's what would happen, but to really see it on that scale, I think it's easier to sort of believe it in your gut at this point.
Mm-hmm. I actually also, I remember a tweet that you actually put out that you said that we need a stablecoin grandma index to show real world adoption. I love that. And also make sure that no algo stablecoins rise again. So stablecoin grandma index.
Yeah, I mean, the stablecoin grandma index, it's somewhat tongue in cheek, but I actually think it's a cool idea. It's like, it's basically just like how many grandmas use any given stablecoin, right? And I said, partially jokingly, although I do actually think this is maybe true, that I think Reserve is maybe used by more grandmas than any other stablecoin because it's used as ordinary money in some countries in Latin America. And then the idea is like, if any algo stablecoin started to creep up on the grandma index, that's real cause for concern. It's sort of okay in my book if crypto degens want to experiment with whatever they want to experiment with. They can have smart contracts that are just transparent Ponzi schemes, and as long as it's just gamblers gambling against gamblers, then like, okay, fine, have your fun. What I really don't like is when people, believe that the thing that they're using is going to be stable and is going to preserve their savings, and then it doesn't. So if anyone out there wants to start the stablecoin grandma index, send me a DM. I'll help you get it off the ground.
We'll put in the show notes. Well, let's talk about Reserve. So Reserve, you're a co-founder, if I'm not mistaken. So you lead the R Token tribe. Yep. And are responsible for developing and promoting your smart contract protocol and including decentralized governance. Just side note, are you aiming to eventually become a DAO?
Yes, but in a sort of different way from how a lot of projects do it, because each R token that is governed in a decentralized way kind of has its own DAO. And so it's sort of like all of the stable coins that get created on top of the Reserve protocol will sort of be individual DAOs. And then there is a question about like, what about the project overall in terms of like, making like developing improvements to the base protocol and so on. And so there we have ideas for how to basically decentralize the project further. There's a few things that we're still exploring and haven't solidified on how to do that yet. So I guess I won't say one thing or another because I don't want to misinform. But generally speaking, the idea is to get to the point where the project is fully decentralized on the protocol side, both in terms of the ongoing development and the individual R tokens. And one thing about that is that you could have one R token get pretty popular, and then a bunch of people could, write a bunch of code that upgrades sort of the protocol, the instance of the protocol that R token's running, and other R tokens may not use those updates. So actually, over the course of time, there might not even be one coherent effort to improve the reserve protocol, because the reserve protocol really is just a template that you can use to make different instances. And so it's actually going to look like a series of DAOs.
So today I speak with Denison Bertram, the founder of Tally, a DAO operations platform. Tally provides tools for decentralized decision-making and governance for distributed ledger ecosystems. In my conversation with Denison, we will try to introduce the basics of DAOs and take them further in terms of their role in the Web3 ecosystem, their legal implementations, their tools and use cases, and of course, wherever our DAO conversation takes us along the way. So Denison, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Nina.
You entered crypto well before the Web3 term became a thing. You created a Bitcoin exchange 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago, founded various crypto-related projects. So one of them is Tally, like I just mentioned. Yet you're also a renowned fashion and commercial photographer, having shot for some of the world's top brands, if I'm not mistaken. So that's truly fascinating and an eclectic background. So I'm just curious, I know you've spoken a lot about your background and your path, but enlighten us. And I'm just curious, what brought you to Europe and namely the Czech Republic, where you founded the Bitcoin exchange in the OG days?
So that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I came to Europe in the early 2000s because I kind of wanted to change. I was, I just started university. America didn't really feel like the place for me at the time. America still actually looked different. People sort of think that 20 years is not very long, but actually America looked very different. And at the time, I felt like being a person of color, trying to be in tech was very difficult. I mean, frankly, really racist, and I didn't feel like I had time for that shit, to be frank.
Yeah.
So I left because I just wasn't interested in dealing with it, and that was totally the right move. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I left for sort of like greener pastures, and went to the Czech Republic, which at the time was going through a great cultural change still. Right. It had been 10 years after the revolution, but the society had not yet really congealed into what it would be. So it was a great moment of change. And it was just a fascinating experience. All of sort of like Central and Eastern Europe was in flux. Everything was different every day, every year, everything looked different. And so it was a special time for sure. I like to joke about how, back then you can meet someone and make a deal to see them again in like a week or two. And you'd say like 5 p.m. on the corner of, this street or that street, and you didn't have cell phones. Mm-hmm. So, a week later you'd just be there, right? Like, it was really fascinating looking back on not having the internet be like a regular part of your life and living in a different place. So yeah, just a special time. That was, 10 years before Bitcoin came around. So when Bitcoin came around, the world already looked pretty different. So that was sort of like just a different era in and of itself. But the early Bitcoin days were pretty crazy. When I created the exchange in the Czech Republic, it was like monopoly money, and people thought it was just the dumbest thing in the world. So it was very hard. You can imagine that, like, Europe is notoriously difficult to raise startup capital from. So you can imagine how hard it would be to raise startup capital for a business selling monopoly money
10 years ago.
So it was just like a really, really hard time, but people were interested. The people who got it really got it, and were really excited about it. And it was kind of a wild journey.
The exchange, and then it led you, I guess, eventually to founding Tally. And there was a few projects that you did before that. But before we dive into Tally, because today we're going to focus on DAOs, I know this will be your nth time explaining it. And on previous podcasts, you talk of the concept of DAOs. And obviously for people who are listeners, we have a wide range. So DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. You talk a lot about how basically they existed pre-crypto, right? So we can argue a DAO is not a crypto thing, but more like a transparent, I would say, governance system getting fine-tuned and more practically implemented through the crypto and digital Web3 economy era, with the value of decentralization at its core. I know you don't like defining DAOs, but maybe let's try to do it in some shape or form, and trying to answer what are they, how do they work today in 2022, and why should we care about them going forward?
Yeah, I think the definition part, again, is hard to do.
Right.
But recently we put on a conference here in New York, DAO NYC, and someone there gave a really kind of interesting take on it. And it went something like a DAO kind of needs at least 2 out of the 3 letters. Maybe it's decentralized and it's autonomous, but it's not entirely an organization, or maybe it's like a decentralized and it's an organization, but maybe it's not autonomous, or maybe it's autonomous and it's an organization, but maybe it's not yet decentralized. I think the probably useful takeaway right now, the sort of like practical definition of what it is people who are trying to organize some sort of system to get some sort of thing done, and they don't want to use, or they choose not to use, some other sort of legacy organizational tool, whether it's like the corporation or an LLC or a Facebook group, right? They want to have greater ownership over their organization. They want to be part of this movement. Generally, they want to manage money together in a decentralized way. And the decentralized way of managing money is important because normally if you created an LLC or you created some sort of corporation, one person's name would be on the bank account. Maybe the bank account is in the name of the corporation, but one person at the corporation has the permissions by the bank to take the money in and out. And that's a very important distinction, right? Because if you create a global organization on the internet, in a Discord chat, for example, and in the Discord chat, you say, for example, myself, I say, hey, we have a bank account, everybody send your $1,000 to this bank address. Well, even though maybe it's a corporation registered wherever I'm based, you're not really going to feel comfortable about the fact that, you essentially all sent your money to me, right? Because you don't really have any recourse, right? Like, $1,000, it's probably not worth you trying to do some sort of international lawsuit. The bank won't respond to you. So, as a member, you'll have no idea how much money is in there. In that sort of design, it's very hard to trust people, right? It's very hard to build that kind of organization, right? And it's also very expensive to get the money in, right? You're going to pay some sort of international wire fee, and if I run away with the money, there's really nothing you can do. The bank's not going to tell you anything. Right. You don't have any real jurisdiction or any sort of rights to it. But with a DAO, you gain at least at minimum a kind of transparency, right? Everyone can see, oh, this is how much money we have. It's in this smart contract, right? Like a big piece of the DAOs today is that you have a smart contract that intermediates this organization, that intermediates the money. And that this account is going to behave according to a certain set of rules around the smart contract. right? And now some DAOs are more or less decentralized than others, right? And, I'm sort of looking at the folks that are using multi-sigs instead of like token voting. And in those sorts of organizations, the bank account is maybe run by like 5 people, or, and you need like 3 of them to like make an agreement to spend the money. And in this case, folks tend to prefer this to a bank account anyway, because now it's at least 3 people have to agree to rob you, which is 2 more than like otherwise.
Right.
And ideally you can see what's going on. So you know when you're getting robbed, more or less. So that gives people like a different sense of security. Mm-hmm. But then really what you kind of want to get to is ideally the sort of full decentralization where any member of the organization at least has some sort of veto say over how the money is spent, right? Where, either it requires a majority of us to agree to give some money, to spend the money, or it requires some portion of us to like disagree. There's these optimistic governance solutions where, one person can say, I'm gonna take $1 million out, and then all the voters can be like, well, no, you're not. We disagree, and they can stop that. Mm-hmm. Or you can have a situation where like all the voters say, yeah, we want to take $1 million out, and then they affect that change together, right? So at the very least, that as a kind of structure when we talk about DAOs from the point of view of this like decentralized, transparent control over a treasury, over some amount of money, is really a big change from what's come before, right? Like before, we always need the state to define the legal status of an organization. We needed centralized entities like banks to manage the funds of the organization. So by disintermediating those 2 things, we really open up an entirely new kind of like category of organization. And an example I like to give pretty often is if you were to create an organization of, 10,000 people in 30 countries managing millions of dollars, that would be a very large corporation. Right. Yeah. It would be very expensive to legally incorporate in all 30 countries.
For sure.
It'd be very expensive to manage a bank account that had, millions of dollars in it. You'd have, some sort of accounting firm, Deloitte or something, managing, auditing the treasury.
Yeah.
And this thing would take years to put together. Right. It would take years to get that paperwork through, be years to organize that.
Sure.
With DAOs, you can build something that large in a matter of hours, right? Like, and it sounds funny, but I've done it personally where, I've had an idea and I'd say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And within hours, you have thousands of people around the world and hundreds of thousands. One project, had like, Dope Wars had like over $1 million in just, a couple hours.
Right.
And collectively, everyone is building something together that's productive, and they're being paid, and they pay one another, and they have all these members, and they didn't pay a dime in legal fees, right? And they were able to do it in this really super efficient way. So at the bare minimum, we're talking about organizations that are fundamentally like internet native corporations, but they scale from the tiniest thing, right? They could be 2 people, it could be 1 person. It scales from 1 person to 1 million people with the same base structure to it, right? And that sort of like efficiency of organization is really unprecedented. And that is something that, may be lost on some people, but it really is kind of a paradigm shift in terms of what's possible now.
Let's talk about Tally. We haven't gotten to Tally yet. So we're talking about a sort of all-in-one platform that builds governance infrastructure for DAOs, essentially an on-chain governance tool, right? So am I saying this correctly? Sort of Tally is the go-to place to start a decentralized community and using tools to vote, propose within, and et cetera, et cetera. Can you take us through Tally and also where it is today in terms of the tools it provides?
Yeah, so we like to talk about Tally as being a place where you can like start, join, and grow decentralized organization. We are the front end for a lot of the large DAOs. Gitcoin, ENS, Compound, Uniswap,
Right.
many more. And we believe right now we focus on on-chain governance. We'll expand to off-chain communities in the near future. But this is a real place where you would go to create an organization and grow it, right? DAOs start as an idea, right? I want to buy ice cream DAO, right? Today is just me. You can come to Tally, you can start ice cream DAO, and now you have kind of like a seed that can grow. And you can use Tally to as more people join, do delegations, allow people to see who are the other members of Ice Cream DAO, get more involved in Ice Cream DAO. Then you can raise some money that goes into your on-chain governance, and you can see that on Tally, and then you can vote on how to spend it, and then your community can grow. So Tally is really a tool that allows you to like manage and run an organization, because organizations are really opaque, for very hard to understand what's going on. DAO tooling is very new, it's very mature. So there's a lot of like needs that people have, and Tally really addresses those, right? Now we support kind of specific kinds of DAOs today, but we're growing as well. So we start to support more. But it's things like NFT DAOs. You know, you can work on Dope Wars, Nouns DAO, Pride Punks DAOs. You know, some of these DAOs. I actually created Dope Wars and Pride Punks.
Right.
Dope Wars is a real success. It's a real big community of people who are just like doing all sorts of amazing stuff.
Yeah, that's
amazing. It's really wild.
How it took off.
Yeah, it really took off. You can participate in Nouns DAO and Lil Nouns DAO. And these organizations have other governance tools, but a lot of people like to interact with them through Tally. So those are like NFT DAOs. You can participate in regular ERC20 style DAOs like Gitcoin and ENS, where, you know, this is an example of, you know, there are some small DAOs on Tally, niche communities. There's a DAO called Femboy DAO, which is very interesting. I had to look up what femboy means.
I was just going to ask,
I'll leave it to the viewer to do the Googling on that. But they have a community and they have a whole bunch of money, and they manage it together on Tally, which is, you know, wild, and that's cool. You know, we don't take opinions as to like what people kind of want to organize around, but it's a small community. And then some communities are enormous, right? Like Gitcoin or Uniswap. They have enormous communities, and their votes have enormous turnouts. Faye and Rary are on Tally, and they have really contentious and frequent votes. So people use Tally to do a lot of things.
Okay, so today we welcome Laurent Perello, the founder and CEO of Visions of Blockchain. Laurent is a Tron DAO blockchain advisor who has been a serial entrepreneur for 25 years. Laurent also worked in cloud computing and turned to focus on Web3 since the beginning of 2017. He's passionate about Web3 as well as the metaverse, from what I had listened to, and he's involved with the Web3 community to learn, contribute, and share his knowledge and experience. Laurent, welcome.
Nice to meet you, Nina. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to share with you a bit about my Web3 journey.
Your very colorful rainbow palette of experiences. You seem to be quite equipped with a lot of experience. So maybe can you just take us a little bit through your bio, and also maybe take us through your path to crypto and the Web3 space?
Yeah, sure. I'm 49 years old, serial entrepreneur since 27 years. So it's really part of my life. I had the chance to start several business in several domains, from publishing. My first business was I published some magazine. I created also marketing agency, event agency. It was the beginning of internet adoption in France, and we were one of the first to offer an online edition. So I had the chance to discover this fascinating innovation. I'm really fascinated by all kind of innovation.
So this was this like the late 90s?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And I had the chance also to fail.
That's good.
I'm really proud of it. In fact, because I learned much more after my first business bankruptcy than during 9 years of success. And I restarted the new business the day after I closed this business, advising company and startup in their business development strategy. Also consumer relationship management and business process management. I'm in love with process and automation. And I had the chance to collaborate to be one of the first, let's say, cloud computing pioneer, working closely with Google at this moment, advising big companies in their digital transformation and cloud computing, collaborative cloud computing solution, what we call now Web 2.
Right.
Yeah. And one day I decided to move from this, let's say, corporate world, feeling that in fact people there were using my neuron and my energy and my commitment just to make more profits.
Of course. Yeah.
It was a hard moment for me because it was highly profitable in a financial point of view. But when you have to cooperate on a daily basis, train people, and you know that they will not be there in 3 or 6 months, and they don't know it's it's kind of life for me, and it was really hard to manage this feeling. So I decided to quit and to offer my services to Web 2 startup, sharing not only my knowledge and expertise in digital transformation or business process management, business development, but also my entrepreneur journey, trying to prevent also failure. Because when you have failed, you are able to easily identify the low signal, saying take care, the collapse is coming. It's just a question of time. And one day a friend of mine, I was living in Morocco at this moment, in Casablanca, and I lived in several countries the last 15 years, and he shared with me the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. And for me, it was
the aha moment with the.
Much more than this, because I had the chance to have several aha moments in my Web3 journey. I think we will come back later about it. But this moment was particularly important for me. I have a few moments in my life that really contribute to who I am. And this moment was really is really a part of this. I have to say I'm not a developer. I'm not a technical guy. Everything I know, it's constant learning process. I learn on a daily basis since years. It's a kind of obsession. I can't sleep well if I don't learn something new each day. And I'm in love with sleeping well. I'm lucky enough to sleep well.
But you're French, of course.
And so I spend a moment, to try to understand this really high-level, tricky stuff. Doing a lot of research, and at the moment I say, okay, you will never deeply understand everything, But in fact, it's not a problem. Let's just read it again, put all these technical parts on the side, and read it as if it's a philosophical postula. I'm in love with philosophy too.
Yeah, actually, sorry to intervene here, but I did actually listen to a Twitter Space conversation, that a recent one that you had with a few folks, and you said that you took every Saturday. This is for the Satoshi Nakamoto paper. Actually, I remember this because I also, for the Satoshi Nakamoto paper, I mean, I couldn't just read it once. I had to go over and over it. And you actually said that you took every Saturday to go over it because every time you read it, it was something different, right? Like you learned, it was more, you understood it better and different every single time you went through an iteration.
Yeah, correct. It's my ritual now.
I mean, that's some serious dedication.
Yeah, but it's, for me, it's also a gift to myself to spend 1 hour per week with myself and myself, rethinking our society, human behavior, innovation, politics.
Yes, everything really, because we're such at a melting sort of, or just at a crossroads now. Well, I actually have to say we share somewhat similar paths. I mean, I worked on Wall Street and was also in the corporate finance and just the whole corporate scene, having bounced around some, big name companies and also through different countries, also European. And at one point I realized it was no longer what I wanted to do, and then had a family. But it's interesting because you're saying what you're going through now, thinking about all this. I can't help but do the same, especially also at this post or mid or whatever this pandemic is. So much is changing. And I wonder, is it maybe a function of our age? You say, okay, you're 49, I'm approaching 45, that we're more aware of what our purpose really should be in this world. You know what I mean?
I think for a lot of people, yes, this disruptive moment force them to consider their life, and more than just their life, the sense of life differently. Since I'm really young, as I remember, I was 6 years old, starting to, trying to at first identify, list all important questions. I should try to get at least a beginning of answer to give a real deep sense to my life. Observing people, their behavior, their emotion. I fall in love with literature. I started to write my first poem when I was 7-8 years old.
Oh, wow.
And writing helped me to escape the brutality of life, of our society. And to really dare to dive on each emotion, sentiment, interrogation, not just living at, let's say, at the surface, but diving deeply. And no, it's also something I bring in what I do. It's not, I used to say, innovating is really something that fascinating, and trying to contribute, to offer an alternative. We often talk about disruption. It's a term, a word I don't use to apply regarding what I do, because what we all are building, because it's kind of, antagonism. I prefer to talk about, to use the word alternative, because I don't want to force anyone to adopt. I want to say, hey, have a look, something different is possible.
Right.
And it changed radically all current approach. We face some recently last 2 years we were constantly in this speech forcing people to apply, and
yes.
I rather prefer to offer an alternative. And I'm as I'm fascinated by innovation. I used to be a speaker at the cloud computing time, and we used to say we have to evangelize. And my main conference was about a little story of collaborative innovation, going from the prehistoric time to nowadays, and showing how it has changed, and how together is the main important part of this concept. And it's something now I bring in what I do, and I spread as I can, telling to people if we have a look to humanity story, taking part to this Web3 movement innovation is taking part of a unique moment in humanity history. We haven't seen such a moment, in fact, because by the past innovation was bring by government or big corporation, and then going to individuals. And at first, most developed countries, and then the other one. Now it's everywhere at the same time for everyone.
Right.
If you know nothing, it's not a problem. Just start learning 5 minutes a day. In a few weeks, you will know much more than 80% of the population. And in a few months, much more than 95% of the population. So, when people say it's still early, it's always regarding, the token crypto valuation. Honestly, I don't care. It's much more important for the humanity as a perpetual experience, in several domains. When you consider this, you don't have the same commitment and behavior in this Web3 ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, you're also one of the judges, right? And the recent, also in the recent, I don't know how many hackathons Tron has, but in the recent Tron hackathon, I suppose this is also one of the ways for you to discover new projects.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This year we have launched what we call the Grand Hackathon with 3 seasons this year. The first one was in March, April. We have just announced the winner of season 2 last week. With a really significant growth, with more than 200 projects qualified. And between these 2 seasons, I have engaged a lot of projects to participate. It's also a way to contribute to our ecosystem growth. And for sure, it's a valuable source of, I was really impressed by a few projects. And during the hackathon as a judge, I can't contribute or help them. But some I plan to do what can I do to help them really to deliver their promise, because it's some projects bring solution which are absolutely needed in my point of view, like holochain Fortech project with decentralized email and decentralized chat. For me, and having engaged big companies to use at this moment, it was Google Apps. With a Gmail, let's say Pro version, and knowing how centralized it is, how dependent you are when you use such a solution. Yes, I'm totally excited to see this new solution.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it's only, in my opinion, a great way to contribute to mass adoption, not being focused on crypto, decentralization, blockchain, Web3, but with improving basic solution that everybody use on a daily basis,
Yes.
email, chat,
Yes.
improving privacy at the highest level. It's absolutely needed.
Today, we're hosting Matthew Baudet, the software architect and founder of the Linera protocol. He's former blockchain researcher at Libra Novi and former software engineer at Facebook. Matthew is a specialist in BFT consensus protocols, cryptographic protocols, and formal verification. He has experience in blockchain infrastructure, AI infrastructure, developer infrastructure, security consulting, and startup development. Matthew, welcome to Blockchain Recorded.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And judging or actually reading your background, you have a extremely rich computer science background, so very technical, with, I believe, over 9 years at Facebook. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you were a researcher at blockchain researcher at Libra and also software engineer at Facebook. So lots of software engineering, and looking at your LinkedIn, you even had a PhD in computer science. Let's just start by having you take us through your background journey. But actually, before you do so, I just wanted to clarify quickly the meaning of BFT, consensus protocols. So that's BFT means Byzantine Fault Tolerance Consensus Protocol, for those of who are not familiar with the acronym. So Matthew, with that in mind, please.
Okay. So, personally, I've always been passionate about science, and in particular, computer science, and maths. So my background, during my PhD, I started being serious about computer security, and I ended up joining a security agency, then a startup, and then Facebook, which brought me to California, and I spent there 9 years. First, I was a software engineer, and then I was a blockchain researcher in the blockchain project of Facebook, which was called Libra initially, and then Gem, and then recently I started Linera, which is really really a new adventure, and also rooted in the research I did at Facebook. So it's all very exciting. So you were asking about BFT consensus protocols. So I guess I can try to define that.
No, I was just trying to clarify, but yeah, go for it.
All right. Okay. So first, protocols are like programs that are meant to be executed in a distributed setup. So with lots of machines, right? Mm-hmm. And they are communicating over the network. And so what can happen is you may want to know that the protocol keeps working if there are some kind of faults in the system. So it could be that some of the machines are crashing, or maybe the network stop functioning. And so BFT, Byzantine Fault Tolerance, is kind of the highest ranked, I would say, tolerance to faults. So where you resist not only crashes and disrupted networks, but you also want to resist malicious nodes up to a point. So perhaps a third or slightly less than half of the nodes that are participating to the protocols might be completely deviating from the protocol and trying to kind of attack everybody else. So it's a pretty strong security property, Byzantine fault tolerance. Mm-hmm. And now consensus protocol. So consensus is basically what you're trying to achieve with the protocol. And so in this case, and in the case of blockchain, so it means you have a protocol and trying to agree on something, on a number of decisions. And in the case of blockchains, that will be typically what is the next block in the chain of blocks. So so protocol to agree on things with a high fault tolerance against malicious nodes.
It's we're shooting these terms, right? So latency, and then of course scalability, and it's hard not to allude to the blockchain trilemma, right? Which is a pretty well-known concept that was conceptualized by Vitalik Buterin in 2016. So that's for all the listeners that haven't not heard the term yet. It was It was conceptualized by him, and it addresses three main challenges developers face in creating a blockchain, or just in general, which in the space, which are what we just talked about, right? One is scalability. The second one is decentralization. And the third one is security. So the goal obviously is not to compromise any of these three facets. Although the way Bitcoin and Ethereum started is that they basically started with trading off scalability, right? So putting decentralization and security ahead. But now the story may be different. How do you see the solution to this trilemma stand now in 2022 with all the upgrades going on? I mean, I know it can be a difficult question, but with the merge and et cetera, and how do you see this? Do you see a solution to this trilemma? Is there a solution? Is it even possible?
Right. Yeah. Well, so that's another big question.
Big one.
I would say first, it always depends on on the meaning of each of the concepts. I mean, the what we put behind the words. So, for instance, scalability. If you don't need a low confirmation time, so low finality in layer one, then if you just want throughput and low fees, people who are working on ZK rollups, they really think they have it. Using the magics of cryptography and validity proofs, they are able to compress a large number of transactions into a short or constant size validity proofs, and that just need to be verified on the layer one. And so in this case, that is one of the favorite solution, I think, of the community. When it comes to solving the blockchain trilemma. Now, of course, I'm going to say, what if we actually care about the finality time in layer one, and perhaps because we are targeting some of the applications we just mentioned. And in this case, personally, my approach is to look again how would we define decentralization, for instance. And in the past, oftentimes it's been understood as just the sheer number of validators. And with that definition, I do think you can't really have a low latency system at scale, just because the overhead of the coordination between a large number of validators with high throughput is going to not be sustainable, but to be hard to sustain. And also I would say large number of validators with commodity hardware also was the constraint that people have been really working and not really criticizing, not really second guessing so far. And so, but I think it's not the end of the story. There's room to investigate notion of decentralizations for large validators, and that's what we're doing at Linera.
But do you think it's solvable? I mean, okay, I know you said in terms of what the terms are behind scalability. So I don't know if you were just to say scalability, speed, and decentralization is a big one. Security, obviously, I guess, but if you were to have independent computers running on the network, is it even solvable?
I mean, I think I would say short answer. Nothing is impossible unless you see a proof of impossibility, and then you would have to look at the assumptions of the proof and exactly what's behind all the terms. Sure. And I think ZK, like I said, ZK rollups. So like the kind of cryptography that is being developed is one example of something that looked completely impossible and seemed to be, in fact, increasingly becoming feasible. So and in fact, there could be applications of validity proofs beyond ZK rollups, for instance, to strengthen auditing and other kinds of systems, including low latency systems. So I'm personally relatively optimistic, but of course there's still some work ahead of us.
Sure. So let's talk Linera. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Linera? That's the
yes, Linera. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly from the research that I've done, you're building a new blockchain protocol with low latency, no mempool, and linear scaling that will be secured by proof of stake and run by fully audible and accountable validators and internally sharded. That's a mouthful. Did I summarize that correctly?
Okay, yeah, that was a lot. This is a new so this is a new layer one that we are developing. It's based on research that started when I was a researcher at Facebook, and initially was only targeting large scale, low latency payments. So it was the original system. The ancestor of Linera was a research project for low latency payments. And so we kept the general architecture, which was I think really new and really interesting, and are generalizing this to allow to make it look like a general multi-chain system. And so, like as you said, the validators in Linera, what's interesting is that they are internally sharded. So it's a multi-chain system, and each validator has all the chains, and that's going to be a major difference if we compare to a traditional blockchain sharding, where you have more like a collection of independent blockchains with different sets of validators. In the case of Linera, what we're looking at is validators that have all the chains. Each of them has all the chains, and they are sharded, but it's not visible from the outside. Pretty much like a normal internet service. You know it's sharded, but as a user, you don't know what are the shards.
And apart from that difference, where else do you differ from sort of the latest generation layer ones?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the main difference. The latest generation layer ones, what they are investigating is generally more how to optimize the latency and the throughput of a single chain, using really a number of engineering techniques, such as parallel execution. But they are considering a single chain, and in which the user transactions have to be executed sequentially, at least from the point of view of the outside world. It needs to be a sequence of order transaction, and so that puts essentially a limit to how fast you can after you exhaust all the ideas, all the optimization. There's always a limit based on, like, for a particular architecture. There's always a cap on the transaction per second, because it's a single chain. And so in Linera, we are looking at a different problem. We are looking at how to have many chains communicate with each other extremely efficiently. And so that it's very cheap to add new chains. In fact, in Linera, we want to make it possible. In fact, it's going to be encouraged for users to have their own chain, so that they can create new blocks and, for instance, move money out of their account by creating new blocks with extremely low latency due to this particular setup where they own their own chain. So there are some really big differences. It's actually mostly complementary efforts, I would say.
Thank you so much for your time and your work contributions to the space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again to our guest, as well as thank you everyone for listening. A big thanks goes to Coin Market League for co-sponsoring this episode. Thank you also to the Baria Music team for providing their music. You can check out their latest album on bariamusic.com. You can find all supporting information on our website, blockchainrecorded.com, and listen to us on Google, Apple, and Amazon podcasts, as well as Spotify, Radio Public, and Stitcher. Stay healthy and tuned for our next episode.